double on you. So I don't know. It's a tricky
I
problem to solve.
I definitely wish that everyone that just wanted to Mythic Plus and just wanted to raid could actually do that with very little downside for what it's worth. I think that just makes sense for everyone. I just definitely don't believe that is the majority of people who interact with PvE mainly.
I mean, it's 100% not the majority. Like, you're 100% right on that. But I do think for the portion that are Mythic Raiders and are high-end key pushers, not even high-end, like just people who push beyond 20s, right? Like realistically, like, a lot of people who
which is extremely high-end, by the way.
Yeah, it's still very high-end.
People who don't just get the portals and then stop, but the people who push beyond that, you are talking like the 1%, full stop, like extremely small amount of people that go
right. Like, but there's still, like, you know, a large, like, maybe not large, but like there's still a sizable
group
of players who Mythic raid own. Like, like basically, I'm looking at the Mythic Raiders and people who are doing above 20s. Because like people who do above 20s, they're not just going for loot anymore or portals or whatever. They're like going for less tangible rewards. And same with people who raid Mythic. And like realistically, like most people who raid Mythic are quote unquote forced to do Mythic Plus, and a lot of people who are doing above 20s, they're like super compelled to do raid, especially whenever there's OP trinkets. So like, you know, this patch would be the Fyrak Rage Heart trinket especially for healers, which is like super cringe. Like healers having to take a tank trinket is like usually the worst thing ever.
2, 1.
Weren't DPS taking a tank trinket too?
Yeah.
I feel like that hasn't been talked about enough.
Yeah, that's
like really weird.
It's really
that's
bad.
Not good.
Yeah, like, whenever there's these trinkets that are almost mandatory, well, not mandatory, but like they're
very
so
rare
powerful.
Too. It's very rare. It's a tank trinket, and like, oh, everyone wants this thing. That's way too strong. Like, for sure.
Yeah, and there are still a lot of healers who complain to this day that like they don't have one incentive patch. Well, yeah, you're a healer, but it sucks.
Well, yeah, you just have to throw the buff healer barb in there.
Okay, but I mean, it's a tank trinket, but yeah.
All right. On that note, that's going to be the end.
Well, okay. Well, I'll say one more thing though. How about let's bring back PvP gearing too? Let's throw a bone to the PvPers. Let them have their game mode revived, because that's like the surefire way of reviving PvP.
Well, what do you mean? Having PvEers have to PvP to get gear again?
Maybe not have to, but you know, like you give some good shit in PvP. How about that?
Yeah, just remove the eye level scale up for PvP gear.
It's really interesting
and just
like
buff the base eye level of it.
What I gather from PvP community is like, you know how we're talking about like the people who do Mythic Plus keys after getting the portals for the purpose of pushing higher is like an extremely small percentage of people that interact with Mythic Plus or even do Mythic Plus mainly. That is, I think what's left of the PvP community at all are those people. Or it's at least an extremely larger percent of the overall PvP player base are people who feel that way. And those people actually don't want some super intricate, really cool gearing system. They want it to be extremely simple. You get what you get per week, a little bit of conquest, little honor, and then like it's just progressing, and it's the same thing every patch. They don't want too much like I remember like they tried that a lot, and it's kind of just what's left of the PvP community just really wants it to be basic and, you know, fair, and you just go in and blast, and it's all about player skill. And I think that adding cool rewards to it, I wonder, this is again, I don't PvP all the time, I'm kind of guessing here, but like I wonder how much of it is they don't even want cool gear like that, because that almost implies that like if you're doing PvP to get some PvE stuff, that PvE stuff also has to make sense in PvP. And I remember that they hated that kind of, right? Like, weren't those trinkets too good?
They 100% hate that. Yeah, it's like the worst thing ever. But they also love it when PvEers have to PvP, just because, like, you know, it bolsters the amount of players that are participating in it. Yeah, I shouldn't say, like, you know, force PvE players to play it, but, you know, like, incentivize PvE players to.
Yeah, I mean, if doing PvP. Like if filling out your arena Great Vault or whatever made your gear better, people would definitely do it.
Yeah. In the comments in the thing, let us know. First of all, if you're a PvE player and actually kind of secretly, even though you won't tell your friends, like enjoyed the time in Shadowlands where you would go in PvP a little bit and you kind of like that. And also PvPers, let us know if we're wrong about the gearing system. Like if like Like, do you guys want a more intricate, cool loot system, or do you like kind of knowing what to expect and having it be more about player skill? Both of those things we're not super sure on, but just let us know. If any PvPers listen to this, maybe a few left over from the Venruki episode. Shout out the PvP community.
Yeah, shout out.
Yo, shout out to you guys. You have a ton of you guys.
That's right, both of you out there. Shout out.
Both of you guys. Yeah, we're just the PvEers are gonna hate this too. They're gonna be like,
dude. By the way,
we have to PvP now because of these idiots.
I want to point out, and just for people who are listening to this now, our episode with Venruki was awesome, and it wasn't super PvP based, and he's a fantastic guest, super eloquent, very well spoken, great takes, and that is like our 10 out of 10, like most, like when you look at your YouTube views, it's like the last one of the last 10 videos, and that is a crime. So if you're listening to this, I'm actually ordering this, or if you like Potty C, if you're part of the community, go watch that episode if you haven't. It was really interesting, and it's not like fully PvP coded. We talked about a lot of stuff. I know a lot of you guys don't like that. That's probably why you didn't listen to it, but please do that. It was a very good episode.
Yeah. I wasn't there, but I listened to it, and it was pretty good. You guys should check it out.
Yeah, no cat. Wait, oh yeah, that's why we had him on.
Yeah.
He was a replacement for our cat.
Well, he wasn't a replacement, but I wanted to be there too. What the hell?
Well,
were you in MDI
what were
prison?
You doing?
Yeah.
I was doing freaking MDI garbage bullcrap.
You gonna do TGP?
You don't remember? Yeah, probably.
Wow, that's cool.
Dude, by the way, I've been listening to some PvPers and like, you know, seeing their chats and stuff, and my god, they hate add-ons. I never seen such descendants towards add-ons. Like, I didn't realize that was that big of a thing.
I don't think that's surprising at all. I mean, I will have Venruki on. I think we were talking about having him on for a Weak Auras episode or an add-ons episode. But like, think about the add-ons that are kind of just corny in PvE. Like, most everyone would agree, like, the popular takes are pretty much every UI and, you know, like quality of life add-on, super cool, never been a big problem. But like the stuff that is affecting in raid, like boss add-on telling you what a boss is going to do or exactly what to do in a raid, like that stuff's kind of corny. We don't like that. In PvP, all of the problematic add-ons are that it's telling you what your opponent is going to do or what they did do or how long of a DR they have on this or how long of a cooldown they have on that, which takes away from like the root of what PvP was. So like, if you think about it, the reason why the PvP community, I think, hates add-ons so much is the main thing they interact with are only the really fucking bad ones, and that sounds like a way worse situation than what we're in, right? So yeah, I definitely feel for them for that. And also,
have you seen their UIs too?
Yeah, they're getting real because it's such a competitive advantage. Like, you got to. Yeah.
Yeah,
really
it's a lot
so
of information.
messy.
It's very messy. Yeah, it looks bad. Looks like Sang's UI from Thor of Thunder. Shout out.
I saw that tweet.
And one more thing, we may have a podcast episode come out a little bit earlier next week. We're not really sure. You know, Blizzard stated that Alpha might be coming out before Season 4. If that ends up happening next week, we'll probably do a separate episode because there's going to be just so much to cover. So we may not do, if there's no Alpha this next week, we might not have an episode. But if there is, then we might just be expecting probably an episode at some point when that happens. It'll probably take us a day to record it when it happens, but we might have an extra one. So you pod enjoyers, you may have some extra content in the upcoming week or two.
All
Stay
right.
tuned.
Yeah. That's about it for us this week. Potty you later.
Yep. Pod bye.
Thanks for killing the priestess. You have only succeeded in strengthening my hold on the temple.
Or would you rather have your best build and best talents kind of be the best thing for AoE and single target at the same time, which means your class will be more powerful? Look at Havoc Demon Hunters right now. Look at mages. Look at all these. Look at warlocks currently. Demon warlocks. Like the classes that get. Look at Enhanced Shaman. The classes that get all of their cleave and single target at the same time don't really have a lot of interesting decisions to make. But man, are they really, really good at everything all the time, and that's really strong. But then like, some classes have really, really cool and different feeling AoE single target cleave builds, and that is like kind of accomplishing what Talon Trees wanted as far as like variability and like you're always kind of moving around and changing stuff and all that. But then it's coming at a clear. We've seen this for like over a year now. It comes at a clear lack of power. So, that's the one question I think they kind of need to figure out, and they need to pick a direction to go there, and they need to make every class feel like that and not half and half, because then it's just a balance issue. So overall, I think Talon Trees are excellent.
I hope they continue down this route, and I hope that by the start of next expansion or very shortly after, every single class's talent tree feels like the ones that have recently looked at.
Right. I mean, you touched on most of the important points. I don't know how they can go about the decision making between having talents that just give you everything and then just having talents where you have to choose between two major choices, one of them being AoE and single target. Well, I mean, how do you guys feel about these specific points? Like, how do you guys feel about AoE versus single target? Should it just always be you can have both, or should you have to choose between AoE and single target?
That one I think can be fine either way, but I agree it should be more standardized so that there's not these specs that I know historically there's been some like Arms Warrior and Sin Rogue before the rework where you're just looking at it and it's like, man, my AoE and single target builds are so different from each other and I really can't do one well without, like, it's like a, you know, classic. So there are some classic
Arms Warrior Season 1 was
yeah.
like, you would not believe it if you played another class. But it's also never, okay, so I actually probably should have been more clear. I don't actually think there is a spec out there that is playing one build, and that one build with every single talent does full single target AoE. Like, even in Enhance's case, probably the closest, you're still taking Crash Lightning and AoE. Like, you're swapping talents. In Havoc, you're dropping, you know, either Serrated or Furious Gaze for Ragefire and either, you know, Glaive Tempest or something else. Like, you are changing talents. The difference is changing 2 talents to get your AoE versus changing 4 or 5 is massive and can be the difference in, like, 10 and 20, 30, 40k single target loss to get your AoE stuff versus another class losing a lot less. So it's more of a balance issue, but the question is, like, if you were to homogenize, well, homogenize is the bad word. If you were going to, like, make all the specs, what is the ideal amount of talents you want to swap to get to your AoE, right? Because, like, not every talent tree point is I'm choosing single target and AoE. Sometimes it's a lot more nuanced than that, right? It can be entire different builds. Like, Enhance's other half of their tree is this physical build that's just totally different from their elemental build, right? It's not, those choices on every single node are not just that. But yeah, I think just finding a number of, like, what it makes sense to swap being correct and then trying to make most builds feel like that.
Right, but in that situation, though, like, how would you have talent variability, and wouldn't that defeat the purpose of having the talent trees to begin with if you're basically playing the same thing, flexing 2 different points?
I don't think so. Like, there's a few tiers I've played now in Raid and Mythic Plus. In Mythic Plus, I think you end up doing a lot of the same stuff. Some classes, class trees, you, like, swap around some utility stuff based on affix and stuff like that.
Ooh, okay, well, so that's like another point too, right? So now we're talking about utility versus throughput. So would you say, like, it's ever a good thing? Well, no, that applies for the spec trees too, because, like, you look at Shadow Priest, for example.
Oh, that's
they
just
would
bad.
have to spec into silence. But yeah, like, is that ever a good thing though? Like, is it ever a good thing where you have to,
absolutely
like, spec into
no,
when
horrible.
Moonkins had to, like, lose DPS
unassailably bad.
Beam,
Unassailably bad.
horrifying.
Anytime a class, especially in their spec tree, but it's more nuanced than this because some classes' class trees are different. Like, if in your spec tree, if you have to choose between damage or some enhanced version of CC, like Solar Beam versus, like, I think even still they lose damage to take, like, the longer Solar Beam or the shorter Solar Beam CD, right? Like, but in the beginning of the expansion, it was much worse. But the thing is they do it in class trees too. Like, some classes have great class trees where there's basically 0 power, or there's very few things and they're very easy to get, and then you're just choosing other things. But then some classes are by default choosing between, you know, throughput or... I think they should remove that. I think class trees, and I don't know why they chose to go half and half on this, but I don't see the reason why class trees should really have much throughput in them at all outside of free stuff. I think that the more interesting class trees are certainly ones where you're branching out to fill some kind of utility niche or vision, and not ones where you basically are locked in 95% of your points are throughput, and then you can kind of choose, and even in those ones where you kind of choose, you're losing a little bit of throughput. That decision feels terrible.
Yeah, but that's why it's rough, right? Because, like, on one hand, we want the tree to provide most of what the class needs, which is, like, you know, having single target and AoE and having the utility that the class deserves. But on the other hand, if we provide them with all of that, then like, where's room to flex and where's room to change talents? I feel like the best solution would probably be to have talents that change how your character plays. Like maybe for Demon Hunter, for example, you have mover versus no mover, and that's like a playstyle decision. But do you ever really want to tie power behind it? Because whenever there's like a 5% damage gain, you will always opt for the 5% damage option, right? Like if the movement
Players that are like-minded
5%
with
ahead.
us in this call will always do that. Yeah, I think there's a portion of the game that definitely will have a choice there, but not. We do not subscribe to that line of thinking. Yeah,
Not at 5%.
Yeah, I mean,
I think at 5%.
that is kind of true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
5% is massive in WoW. Yeah. I don't know.
But to be fair, we have seen times where people would like Frost DK, where they would play two-handed Frost DK over Breath DK. So that is kind of true in that sense.
Yeah.
But would that be
yeah.
would that be a success if they had that type of option in the talent tree, where you just have like different play styles, and then one is just strictly worse, but you know, like it's a different play style, and it could be something that players prefer.
Yeah, man. The reason why I'm a fan of talent trees is I acknowledge that, especially if you are some classes, you will listen to this and just think it's baloney. Because, and you are right to think that, because your class tree is just made with less quality than others, and that's just a fact. But the ones that are made well, and it's more than you think. It's not like there are 3 that are good and the rest of them are bad. Like, there's a lot of really, really good class and spec trees in this game. The good ones, in my opinion, are significantly better than the mop talent trees we had recently. And I would rather them, since this is evergreen, we're not losing these talent trees at the start of next expansion. They're going to continually work on this perpetually till the end of time, right? So I like the ambition to get them to the point of where they are all that good. You know, you can pick a couple of patch to work on. You can probably do a big chunk of them during an expansion. And I think the game is better off having them be like the good ones. It's just been definitely a bit of growing pains this expansion. And there are probably a few classes out there. Maybe it would be fun to make a list of like who got the most screwed by this change, because there are absolutely those people. But some of them are unbelievable and have been the main reason why some classes in this game are actually currently like the best designed version of them ever. Not a lot, but there are some. And they usually have insanely good talent trees. So, I hope they can. I hope they continue with it. I don't know if you guys think it would, if you agree with that or not. But I know there are some anti-talent tree people.
I would agree for the most part.
Yeah, I think that the issues we brought up are ones that do exist, and the quality varies wildly from tree to tree. I think that they've found a way to make a lot, like the reworks are OP in a lot of cases. That's something we're going to move on to soon, but the talent trees that have been reworked have also been better qualitatively for the most part as well. In some cases it's hard to separate that from them being OP, because in some cases, you know, just if your thing is doing too much damage, it's going to feel more fun as well. But I do think that they have figured out how to make some pretty fun talent trees with some pretty good optionality in them. I think they have some good tools for it as well. I think the choice node tech, like putting comparable effects on choice nodes, or like utility against utility, you know, throughput against throughput, those sorts of things onto a choice node, I think has a lot of potential to it. And I'm encouraged that if you look at hero talents, that's basically what they're going to end up being. But it also makes me think, like, man, the mop talent system was basically just a bunch of choice nodes, right? And no actually deciding which branch of the tree you're going down. So if I'm advocating for choice nodes and for less like deciding of different branches what you're going down, I'm basically saying go back to that, which is weird because it seems like this is better, but
That is true.
I don't know. It's because like basically hero talents are basically just that, right? Hero talents are basically just the mop talent tree tech, but disguised.
Kind of true, yeah.
Yeah.
I also feel really bad that like in most spec tree, there's like a vision of multiple things. There's mover versus no mover DH. There's caster versus no caster, holy paladin. There's elemental and physical enhance. Not every class is like this, but they have like visions of the class that can be a change. I guess technically there's single-minded fury and Titan's Grave, even though not really. Like, there's those ideas. I think they've had some issues this expansion doing this right, or sometimes they do this right and sometimes where they do this wrong. Like, for example, right now, Demon Hunter, really, really powerful class. They've been nerfed a few times. The no mover and mover are like really, really close in range. Like, they're good. Like, you could play both, and that's an idea that kind of works. That historically hasn't really been the case for Frosty Cave versus like a Blit versus Breath. I know right now, Holy Paladins, they are a recently reworked class, and they had their time in the sun right after they did get that rework, but then they like... Basically what they did, like, people talk about them ruining their gameplay. Here's really what they did. They forced the caster build in Raid this patch. They were melee for a really, really long time, and most of the stuff you take in Raid right now is like much more caster-oriented. Echo's Paladin before this Raid quit because he hated Paladin, like almost citing that exact reason. Scaris. Dryny is basically not playing WoW until this has changed. He absolutely hates this version of Paladin. And this is just a small microcosm of... Every class can go through this, but if they're ever going to have distinct builds in the tree, they need to make sure that one of them is never alienated, because there are people that play the game to play specifically one of them, and I think that's a really, really hard thing to manage. That's probably a really hard thing to do, where you have two things be like really close together and both playing, and they made the decision to have Paladins basically only really be able to play one while having any mana, and I think that's a problem. So I think managing that going forward could be something they look to do more at as well.
Yeah, I've talked about this a lot with a bunch of smarter friends, and like Evade included, and I've heard a lot of anti-new talent tree sentiments. A lot of these pain points are exactly that. I feel like they are going in the right direction, though. Like it's a good change. I do enjoy the new talent tree, but I do think it needs a whole lot of work. And so far, we're almost one expansion deep, but they still feel a little bit unfinished. Because I remember we've talked about this at the beginning of the expansion. I remember bringing up how long will it take for them to actually finish these talent trees. We were expecting like maybe 1 or 2 patches into the expansion, and we're at that point where we've seen a lot of reworks, but there are probably still a whole lot more talent trees that need that fresh coat of paint, as you've mentioned. So one other thing I wanted to touch on with the talent tree is, what do you guys think about the whole choice between having to take like Purge, Kick, CCs, like Turn Evil, Repentance, all that stuff? Because like I feel like that has been a huge pain point in the tree this expansion, especially when it comes to M+, when it comes to like weeks with Corporeal, where you have to like CC the ad, and it's like, oh, I forgot to take my CC, or it's Afflicted week and somebody has to take a poison spell and you just forget to take it. I feel like that's always been a really annoying part of the talent tree, because we've always had these abilities baseline, and now you actually have to spec into them.
So I spent some time over that. I think I may be missing a few classes, I guess technically disc, but you mentioned like how long are they going to take to get through all of these. I marked down all the ones that they have like said that they're reworking in a patch or made like major changes to. Forget if it's like positive or negative. I'm looking at most of these now. It's certainly mostly positive, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So 17. It's been a year since talent trees have come out, and they have reworked almost exactly half of the total specs in the game. So this is just doing simple math. We're getting war within a year from now or something like that, probably a little bit less. I think the hope would be, I'm sure they're spending more time on this going into an expansion because they're not making another raid. So like we're hoping that all of them get reworked by then, maybe that's I hadn't actually like looked at it like that before. That would be good.
Like before War Within comes out?
Yeah, like War Within, the launch of War Within is... Well, I'm sure it's not going to be, like, slammed down all at once. It's going to be probably, let's just say, like, every 2 or 3 weeks in the alpha or beta cycle, they're fully focusing on the talent tree for one thing. And, like, throughout all of alpha, they're kind of doing this rework thing constantly.
In the alpha and beta cycle?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, not for... Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty likely. I don't know the extent to... Like, they also have to be doing... God, it's what, 80 hero talent trees or something like that as well.
Oh, very good point. That's fair.
Oh,
But those thing is
yes,
those
it-
things are certain. Actually, it would be a great question for an interview, which have not happened.
Wait, no,
recently.
it's only 39. I'm stupid. It's 39 hero talent trees, I think, as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would have to. Yeah, I mean, I would be really interested to ask, because I actually talked to them about this at BlizzCon. There are like, you know, you don't always have to interview Ian and Morgan. Sometimes it's nice to interview people that are kind of on the ground and like doing a lot of that stuff. Like the reason you send in your questions to Ian and Morgan ahead of time is so they can reach out to those people who are working on it directly, and they give you like a more nuanced and like complete answer for it. I'd love to hear about their workload. Like, what do they plan to accomplish by the next expansion? Like, as a class designer specifically, or like, would you say like 70% of your workload is going to be on hero talents, or do you think like, you know, a decent goal for you guys is also to do a ton of like class inspector reworks? Like, where does that stand? Are hero talents the priority? Is the base evergreen nature of talent trees the priority? I would love to know exactly how much they plan to do on that. It'd be really interesting.
It's also rough because what I've noticed is that a lot of times whenever they make these reworks, they don't feel finished until it actually comes to live and then it's been played with a little bit. You look at a lot of these trees and they would get played with for the first week or two, and then all the glaring problems come out and suddenly they'd have to make adjustments to these class trees. So like every single reworked tree so far, well, not every single one, but most of the reworked trees so far have been balanced in the poor way. It's rarely the case they hit the mark whenever they do a rework on a spec.
Well, I think that is an interesting. So like we had on here to talk about rework syndrome. I don't think that's unintentional. You're saying it's balanced poorly. I think those trees are clearly have a lot of new synergies and bring a lot of power that way. I think Blizzard intentionally makes those classes strong as well. I think they are putting on their thing for the patch. If you want to come back and play, and what was the most 10.2 most recent patch, they said we're doing a rogue rework. Would it make a lot of sense for them to have all these rogues come back to the game and then like their classes are reworked and they're more fun but they stink? Like having a class be decent definitely increases your likelihood of playing it. It increases the likelihood you're not going to swap to an alt for your guild or want to play something else that's like Fodem or whatever. I mean, I guess what you have to prove this is like outside of literally Red Paladin, every single time a class has been reworked with their spec tree, they have been top tier in all kinds of PvE. At least I have no idea about PvP. Or introduced, I guess, in Ogg's case. Like, they've been extremely good. I don't think that's an accident. I don't think that's them doing the talent trees wrong. I think that is them intentionally having them at a tuning target that is higher than the average class. And then the new synergies of their spec also just make them super strong.
Yeah, but I do think there's a big difference between it being good and it being like straight up OP, as we've seen in Season 2. We straight up had Bear Tank, HPAL, Firebase, Shadow Priest that recently got reworked, and they were just absolutely beyond any other spec.
And Mage, yeah, what about this patch? What got reworked this patch? Disc, which is the best of Mythic Plus it's been in like a super long time. They were super insane in Raid. You basically played 2 on every fight. Havoc, you ran 2 of those on every fight, if not more. They're by far the best Mythic Plus spec. They've been nerfed 3 times, and they're probably still meta. You could maybe argue Mage Rogue instead, but like Rogue got reworked. I just could pull this up again, but I'm pretty sure Warcraft Logs has them as like the single 3 top specs, all 3 of them. It's just simply not an accident. It has to be intentional, and I think you can certainly question whether that's good or not. Again, we subscribe to a line of thinking that maybe does not represent everyone, but, you know, having the whole, like, going into the patch what the OP classes are going to be based on reworks. I mean, maybe if they get all this stuff done in the alpha and beta cycle, maybe this isn't a recurring theme next expansion, but I can say that it's been a little problematic, to say the least, in this one, I think.
Yeah, I do think that is a very valid criticism, because it is exciting if you're like, oh, I'm a rogue player and it's rogue's time to shine because it's getting reworked here. But like, man, if you're just one of the other, you're playing like a DPS warrior or a DPS DK or something like that, you're like, man, I do half the damage of these things, of whichever of the 3 specs they choose on like half of the fights in this raid.
And
like, what?
And it's also compounding with the effect that I have this I have this not great talent tree. So like you have to separate the design of your tree and your power level. And both of them are, if you are not picked for a rework, both of them feel worse to the person who is beating you. That person has a better tree, they're making more fun decisions, their class is more fun to play, and they're better than you. And you're just sitting here like, when am I getting one of these things? And that, I mean, if you are super negative about that, I feel like it's completely warranted. That has to feel bad. If you're, especially if you're a one trick of anything that isn't picked, you just have to feel bad. If you think like we do. And I think a decent amount of people do. Certain a lot of people who listen to this, I think, are more likely to. But you know, maybe not everyone. Well, although I remember this from Shadowlands. I think more people think like that than you think, because they introduced this covenant system, and I think it was like Novel. Who's the like big lore YouTuber man? Is Novel?
Yeah, Novel.
Is it Novel? Novel was doing like a stream, and they were like, "What covenant are you gonna play?" And you would never expect him to have this answer, and it is whichever one does the most DPS. You know, like I really think it's been kind of
That's definitely a lot of players.
Yeah, and it's kind of, you know, and that's the exact kind of thing where like you would assume the like, you know, average casual player is just going to pick the thing that is the coolest. Those were extremely different, colorful, thematic, different things. You would expect them to choose based on that, but no, it's actually just as simple as whichever one does the most damage. So maybe this is a lot more along the lines of that as well.
Well, it's also, I would imagine, like a lot of people, especially newer players, when they look at the talent tree, they probably can't even make the decision themselves. There's like all these different trees, and they just come into like, what do you even call it, like problem paralysis or whatever. And in that situation, like, isn't it just easier if you just like straight up Google, like in 2024 nowadays, you can literally just Google like, all right, what build should I play, and then just like copy and paste it. I feel like that's got to be a lot of players. I'm actually curious about, like, are there actually players out there who literally just like cook their own builds? They like, it's full natty, just like straight up cook their own builds. They don't like look at any other builds. They just do their own thing. It could be. I wonder how bad these builds are.
I mean, okay, so some of the most happy people I've ever talked about or talked with in WoW are people who actually just clear AOTC on Heroic and then just go do other things. They don't really care about their performance or their teammates' performance at all. They just kind of vibe and have fun. I met a lot of these people at TwitchCon and BlizzCon, and I was speaking to Skarzard like sometime last year, and he was talking about how when they were doing these reworks, it was kind of problematic for him because like he had someone in his guild, I think they were like a rogue, and they loved playing like this slower version of Assassination or something. And that's just the thing they've always played, and they loved it. And he was like, oh, well, you know, if that thing's not going to be good, you know, they're still going to play it because they want to play the thing that is. Just like kind of feels bad that it's going to be worse, you know, all those things. And like they kind of, I don't know, you kind of get the idea that those people just game and have fun. I think a lot of those people probably do. Some of them open up Wowhead and choose click copy link on best single target build, you know, probably. But some of them probably cook up their own thing. I mean, I've been in one of those runs. I was coaching a Mythic guild in Castle Nathria that had an Affliction Warlock just lobbing out those Venthyr balls that was, I'm pretty
the meatballs.
Yeah, the meatball. I'm pretty sure it looked sick as hell, but I'm pretty sure it was like a single target loss to select it, or to cast it. But like, you know, some like people definitely do that. I think people that we interact with and we get like constant confirmation bias in our streams from how people play. But again, a lot of the people who watch our streams are people who are likely to think like us. I think those people exist. As far as like making a percentage of the WoW's population of who does and who doesn't, I think you'd just be totally fucking making it up. But I think it's more than people think like this stuff.
I think the amount of people that would pick a weird covenant, like a wrong covenant or whatever, is going to be higher than the amount of people who cook up a talent build. Because like picking a covenant's easy, right? You've got 4 choices. You get to play with all the abilities when you're leveling up. It's one button. You pick it, right? And it does its thing. Cooking up your own talent tree, like that is much more difficult than copying a link, right? Like it's actually the harder thing to do. Obviously, like you can just do it and go through and click buttons that look fun, but like I think that's more intimidating. I think it's more intimidating to do that than to like, you know, just be playing Venthyr or whatever and not think about it and not look stuff up, right? I don't know. So my perception at least is there would be fewer people doing that than we're doing the Covenant thing, which I do think also, obviously that didn't happen too much at our level, but I do know it happened.
Dude,
I would say less than a lot of people argued it was gonna, but still it happened a lot at lower levels of the game.
The full cook on the talent tree would be unironically like insanely hard. It's kind of like the PoE the PoE
Exactly.
thing. Like, no one's going to do that. What you might do is you might copy the build, see what generally is good, understand what goes where, and then just be like, oh, well, I just don't want to play this thing and I want to play that thing. That's probably the extent of the cook, is like removing one thing about it that you don't like and adding something else that you think might be fun. But it's not like just like opening up a fresh talent tree and just start going, you know?
Oh, I want this, and that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, and I'm sure there are people who've done that who've just like literally leveled up and selected their talents and they have those talents. But like, I think, yeah, I think it's so intimidating to try and even do like heroic raid with a, you know, home cooked artisan talent tree.
We gotta try that one day. Just,
That could be-
cook our own
that could be a
builds and
vibe.
Do like some content with it.
That'd be a lot of fun. I'd be down.
All right. So this is probably, I think we're probably chilling on the stuff we've done so far. We had one thing that we didn't discuss and had a question mark on it. Again, that's probably just its own episode.
Yep.
And yeah, so we do have the Patreon question, which Dratnos will so elegantly read to us. Also, quick shout out, in the case like last week where our stream DCs, you know, you can still get full access to that on like Spotify, Apple, all the podcast places. And also we do extra epis on Patreon. We usually answer a lot of the questions we don't get to, so make sure to do that. Amen.
Amen.
Patreon.
Max, if you're ready to pull the router and disconnect it so that Frank has a more fun editing experience again this week,
That'd be good.
now is the time.
I can do that.
All right. Our question, though, is from Gonzo, our Patreon question, that says, this M+ season has been a lot of fun for me, but now that I have my portals and hit an IO score that I'm happy with, there isn't a lot of incentive to continue pushing. I don't have a regular group, so I'm not going to get title, and pugging anything past the early 20s is rough, partially because there are fewer people interested in pushing past the required key level for max vault slots, which makes sense, because there's no real in-game reason to do a 22 aside from higher score. Is there something that Blizzard could do to incentivize pushing keys for people that won't